What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to do a quick overview of the exotic Microcosm. This weapon has been out already for a few weeks, and I've stumbled across a lot of LFGs using this weapon. Um, However, it seems like there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding of when to use it, and when it's good. It's undoubtedly a very good weapon, but I've seen a lot of people use it in ways that it's not very optimal. But before we get into that, I do want to quickly do a rundown of this weapon. So the perks on this weapon, the exotic perk in terms of trait is Paracausal Beam. Fires a beam of kinetic light dealing massive bonus damage to shields. And then in the weapon perks, we have Paracausal Imbuement, which final blows with this weapon get super energy. This weapon gains bonus damage once your super expires. And this is about a 20% buff to your weapon damage on this weapon. It does stack a little weird with low, but overall, if you pop your super and use this weapon, you're going to get about a 20% increase in damage. So looking at this weapon's reserves, we have about 480 in total. And when we add triple reserve mods, we have about 576 in reserves. And if we compare this to some other weapons in terms of total damage, we can see that rockets, our common adaptive rockets, have about almost 2 million DPS, about 1,900,000 in terms of total damage. Whisper, which is again still one of the highest total damage weapons in the entire game right now, leading with about 3.9 million. And Microcosm sits just below it at 3.2 million, comparing that to an exotic machine gun like Thunderlord with 1.6 million in terms of total damage. And the reason why this is important is because of how you're going to be using this weapon. This isn't really a complete total boss melter. It is in certain scenarios, but the majority of the time you're going to be using this weapon is kind of like a primary or is a special weapon. You're going to be using it to melting down majors and to be using it to doing damage to certain bosses. And having a high ammo count for this type of use, using it more like a primary weapon, is important. One thing that a lot of people don't realize about this weapon is that overall kinetic weapons got 15% buff. Over the past year, kinetic weapons have been getting pretty substantial buffs to try and bring them up compared to other elemental variants. And this also allowed with kinetic tremors, and the 50% buff across miners and bosses and everything in between. But Bungie has since nerfed kinetic weapons in terms of bosses. They took away the 15% extra damage from bosses, so it doesn't necessarily stack on bosses. So Microcosm and other kinetic weapons lose that extra 15% damage to their elemental variants. However, this buff still applies to majors and minors, which is why Microcosm absolutely deletes things like champions and major bosses. It's really important for this weapon to look out when you're going to be using it, because certain times it just absolutely shreds and deletes everything way more than a normal power weapon would, like our regular rockets or things like GLs. And this is simply due to the fact of the very specific condition of having a boss with a shield and having a boss that's not tagged as a boss but as a major. And if you have these two things, you get an absolutely insane increase in damage, and the base of this weapon is already phenomenal, leading it to be extremely competitive to other weapons. One of the really good examples of this is in Dual Destiny. The subjugators at the end of the mission have shields, and this allows Microcosm to just absolutely delete them. I have some footage now that I'll play, and me and my teammate were using Microcosm, and it just deletes the boss. I saw a lot of people using this weapon in the new raid, Salvation's Edge, but it did drive me a little nuts because in raids and dungeons now, there are modifiers and surges that apply to all raids that change weekly. But if there's like arc and solar surges, this doesn't, to my knowledge, apply to kinetic weapons at all. And so by using this weapon in raids and dungeons, you're just losing a flat 20% buff to your damage when you could be using literally anything else. Even something that's not as meta as Microcosm or your standard GLs right now will outperform them just because of the fact that you do an extra 15-20% extra damage because of the surge mods. So it's important to build craft to the activity that you're doing. In Microcosm, again, just is not DPS or boss damage weapon. It's really more for the specific scenarios where you're dealing with majors and you're dealing with bosses that have unique aspect systems and properties where this thing just absolutely shreds. But all those things, keep in mind, this weapon is just absolutely insane. That's all I'm going to leave for today's video. Just a quick PSA about this weapon. I'm not going to go too in depth. The numbers are there. It's a very strong weapon. But I just wanted to get out there that people really need to keep in mind when they should be using this weapon, because some people are using it for boss DPS in raids and it's just not working. Or, you know, I mean, it works, but it's just, you could use a legendary and out DPS this thing if you're applying the right surges and you're using it properly. So that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Peace.